We believe in God, the eternal Father.
We believe in the
and in His
Bible
Son, Jesus
to be the
Christ.
Word of God.
We believe in being honest, true, chaste, benevolent, virtuous.
We believe that
and
through
doing
the
good to
atonement
all
of
men.
Christ, all mankind
We
will be
also
saved
believe the
by
Book of Mormon to be the
obedience
Word
law.
of God.
We may say that we follow the admonition of Paul. We believe all things. We hope all things. We have endured many things.
Welcome to Why I Believe on the Mormon Channel. I'm Rick Starr. You might say that Steve Heywood grew up with a hammer in his hand. As a young boy, he traveled with his family as his father was assigned by the church to travel to many areas of the United States to build chapels. Along the way, Steve learned every aspect of construction with his 4 brothers at the foot of his father. As a teenager, he supervised volunteer member crews and worked double shifts building chapels. At the ripe old age of just 25, Steve and his brother managed the remodeling of the Laie, Hawaii temple. He didn't just learn how to build things from his father. He learned the value of work and service and watched his testimony blossom in the process. We welcome Steve Heywood to Why I Believe today to share some of his life experiences and the things he learned along the way. Steve, welcome to Why I Believe.
Well, thank you.
Now, we're in the conference center in the Mormon Channel radio studio. And why is this location important to you? You come from a rich pioneer heritage.
Yeah. My grandfather was Joseph Leland Heywood, and he was a prominent Mormon pioneer, and he was assigned by Brigham Young back in the day to stay back and be the trustee and trust for the church. Well, when he settled to Salt Lake, his property happens to be a few feet away from where I'm sitting now in the conference center. I'm sure that over 100 years ago, I could be sitting right at his kitchen table.
Right here.
Right here on this property.
Oh, that's great. Well, you started as a young boy with your 4 brothers, traveling with your father, and learning construction and a lot of other things along the way. How old were you when you started?
When Dad was called on a building mission, I was 11, but prior to that, he was a custom home building contractor here in Salt Lake City. And I remember times when he would make work fun by teaching us fun little games. One specific instance was when I think I was about 9 years old. There was a house in Mill Creek Canyon. We stepped up on the one corner of the flat-roofed home, but yet on the other side was 3 stories. And Dad had this game where he'd put a penny at the end of each row of all the sheathing or decking that needed to be nailed. And the one at the end of the day that got the most pennies got a bonus quarter.
So this was between you and your brothers?
Between me and my brothers. And boy, I can really just remember that day, and I was working as hard as I could. And insomuch I got a blister on my right hand, and Dad stopped the competition for a sec and wrapped his blue paisley hanky around my hand and cheered me on. And I won that day, and I think my brothers kind of let me held back so they could finally let their brother win for once.
They'd won a few times before you.
Yeah, they had won a few times. But yeah, we started when we were tiny. We were just little. Dad would. I remember also another one where I was digging foundations, and I was so small I can't even remember how little I was. But one of the carpenters came over, and he had a German accent, and he grabbed the shovel and put me on it, and then he, on both sides, would, press that shovel right into the soil, and I remember I must have been maybe 5 then, but Dad had me on a job site from, like you say, I was born with a hammer in my hand.
Well, in a Church News article from 1978, there was an article about your family and about your father and some of your travels, and it said he started out his sons digging trenches, and then he would, once you mastered one skill, he would move you up a level to the next skill.
Yes.
And just keep moving through that way.
Yes. That was until the article, I didn't realize that was his strategy.
But looking back, you see it now.
I see it now.
And look where you are now. You're in this business still. What is your current job?
I work at Primary Children's Medical Center, and I've been there, believe it or not, for for over 28 years. But right now, I'm a senior CAD draftsman there. And just prior to coming here, I had a quick assignment to work through some space design in an office. But, thinking with my heart pounding, I'd miss my ride. But that's what I do. I work at Primary Children in the construction piece
Still
of
in
the
business.
hospital, trying to work hand in hand with maintenance. But there's a construction department there in the hospital, and I do the drawings.
That's great. You mentioned earlier that your father was called to a building mission, and this would be in the 60s, right?
It was in the 60s.
Talk a little bit about that. I'm not sure many members realize these days that there were building missions in the United States back then.
Throughout the United States. He was called to the Southwestern States Mission, and I'm the seventh of 10 kids. And by the way, we talk of my brothers, but I have fabulous sisters. I don't want to have them left out as well.
Well, if there were 10 children, 5 brothers, so you had 5 sisters.
I have 5 sisters, and
Big
I was
family.
number 7. So I'm kind of the tail end, and the reason I bring that up is Dad was kind of old when he was called on the building mission. It was like starting new, starting over. Actually, I mean, here he had his construction company, and here we go out, and it was a 3-year mission, and our first assignment was in Arroyo Grande, and it was in a day where missionaries could choose. I mean, these were the young missionaries. They could choose whether they go on a proselyting mission, or they could go on a building mission. And they were just the most wonderful examples to me. Yeah,
because you were just a young man.
Yeah, I was just
Even before
when I
your
left,
teenage
I was
years.
11. But it takes about a year per each chapel to build, especially when you do donation labor and you're working with the members.
Yeah, that was the days of building donations from the members,
Yes,
and the members would volunteer their services. And you even mentioned that as a young man, you were working double shifts. You were working on the day shift with a regular crew who was hired for some professional work, I assume. And then in the evening, you would have members come in, and you would continue working another shift, and you would supervise them as a young man.
Yeah, I can't believe that they would trust a kid like that, but it was one of the funnest things. I guess the child labor laws wouldn't allow that. And but to me, again, working with my dad and following him from chapel to chapel, it was a blessing, and it was so fun. It was he had different sayings, as you saw in the article. It ends with one, and his philosophy on what he teaches. But all of my brothers and sisters, matter of fact, we should write them all down and make a little book, because there's so many. He'd say things like, fill the back of your shovel and the front will take care of itself. Those little, trims half a haircut. In other words, trying to teach us, hey, you've done 80% of the job, don't quit now.
Yeah.
Type thing. But he had all kinds of fun. Matter of fact, on the Hawaiian temple, we brought my dad over. My brother Bob said, he's retired, let's let him be close to us. We got him a little bungalow, or Bob found one, and Dad would fish out on Laia Point, and then and Dad was, being from a farming background, he would watch the sun come up at 4 a.m. He'd get there at 4 and fish. Well, he was bored doing that, so Bob put him to work on the temple. The Polynesians was assigned to work with Dad to backfill the temple because of the banyan trees and all. You can't get equipment back in there. So they did it all by hand. And one of the Polynesians summarized, I think, everything Dad taught us as Gardner, that was my dad's name, Gardner's Scientific School of Shoveling. Yeah, you load the wheelbarrow this way, and the back also will balance. So he called it Gardner's Scientific School of Shoveling.
Sounds like he was still teaching construction.
All clear, and he could still
retired.
outwork us even on the temple. Yeah.
It's interesting that you weren't just learning construction, but as you were supervising these crews throughout your life, you were learning how to supervise and how to manage people. And one of the things he says in this article is that he about what his sons learned is that they learned that when a worker tells you that you can't do a job, you show him that he can. And I thought that was really interesting, an interesting thought. And then it ends with that quote that you mentioned earlier. My philosophy is do not falter nor shirk, do not loiter nor shrink, but think out your work and work out your think.
Yes. Again, another one of the fabulous little sayings my dad has.
What a great teacher. Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of the topic of work, I want to read, recently President Dieter F. Uchtdorf, in a general conference address, talked about work as an important principle. And I wanted to have you comment on this after we share this quote with our listeners.
Okay.
Here it is. Quote, how I admire men, women, and children who know how to work, how the Lord loves the laborer. He says, in the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread. And the laborer is worthy of his hire. He also gave a promise, thrust in your sickle with all your soul, and your sins are forgiven you. Those who are unafraid to roll up their sleeves and lose themselves in the pursuit of worthwhile goals are a blessing to their families, communities, nations, and to the church. He goes on to say, work is an antidote for anxiety, an ointment for sorrow, and a doorway to possibility. Whatever our circumstances in life, my dear brethren, let us do the best we can and cultivate a reputation for excellence in all that we do. Let us set our minds and bodies to the glorious opportunity for work that each new day presents. Comment on that.
I love listening to the brethren, and I think he's just described our family's life. Mm-hmm. You know, we have been blessed. I see every piece of that. I did not know that our sins would be forgiven us. Gosh, I feel so much better.
Makes you want to work a little harder?
What makes me want to work a little harder.
It does me too.
But I listen to this and how flowing and wonderful he can put it in a way to make me appreciate, what my dad has shown me and what he's taught me, and hopefully what I have tried to instill within my family. Mm-hmm. There's nothing more satisfying than in construction. I don't know. You're sharing a creation. I mean, technically, you've got a wonderful architect, say, for instance, like Emo Fetzer on the Hawaiian Temple. He's put it in a planned form, and we get to create it. I mean, and in the end, look at all the joy that is coming from that one facility, the blessings that are coming from that aspect. All that work that those wonderful people of Polynesia had donated in the different phases and the different times of construction. I mean, I see from this quote, he's kind of summarized the way we should feel, that it's a blessing for all when we work so hard.
Yeah. A blessing to you and your family.
Yeah, exactly.
And the people who you serve through your work. Do you ever, Steve, when you go, maybe you've been to some of the places that you visited as a young man, Arizona, California, Pennsylvania, a few other places. Do you ever go to those places and when you see a chapel, or do you make a specific trip to a chapel to say, I worked on that chapel?
Yeah. Matter of fact, the Arroyo Grande Chapel, the very first one I worked on, years later I went back there and I wrote in some of the notes that, that was one of the neatest things my dad would do. Here, a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, my older brother Roger, that was our assignment, to build the tower. Yeah, to build the tower. And it's a good 40 feet plus on the main structure, and then you have a finial or a lightning rod that goes on top. And years later, I come back and I go, I'm so proud. And then I look and you can tell a 14 and a 12-year-old built it. No, I just, no, thank goodness for block fillers. And no, it's a wonderful thing to say that my dad let me do that. He let me build that. Mix the mortar and work with those missionaries. Actually, the missionaries on that one, the two wonderful Canadian, Dale Tate and Ted Moscow, they worked on the main chapel. Dad let us do that on our own. He let us build that tower. And then,
Steve, as your dad was teaching you the principles of construction, did he make you stretch? Did he make you...
we had to solve our own problems.
Solve your own problems,
oh, for sure.
Come up with solutions.
Yeah, one day on that specific tower, he he had a dilemma. I mean, here we had the scaffolding up. We didn't have the equipment, nor could we afford, I guess, at the day to use a crane or whatever. It was by hand. And he was beside himself. That night he had a dream, and it was a dream of how to build an A-frame and a walk and tackle, and how to bring put the height at exactly, how to balance that finial so it wouldn't be dangerous. And he compares it to at the time when when Nephi was asked to build a ship. He didn't know how to build a ship, and that's kind of the way we would jump into these problems that we might have. And I know Dad was prayerful, and that night I'm sure he prayed, how can I fix this? How can I put this up there? And it went up so slick. It was just a miracle to my little eyes, how we got that. And that was a good 20-some-odd foot finial that had to go up past the top of the tower and then come back into couple
place.
Of sleeves that had to be put in.
Wow.
But
and that's still standing.
It's still standing.
That's
yeah.
amazing.
And it's in the day, too, that was, we would build face jobs. And so when we would, like you asked before, do you ever go back and see? That is a steak center now. You know, you go back in some of the buildings we built back east, they were phase jobs. And so you might have built the first phase. You go back and there's satellite dishes in the back.
They've been added on to.
They've added a cultural hall or whatever. My kids, I always have tried to go to show them so that they could see some of the work. And so every 5 years, I've tried to plan a trip back to New York and to Pageant. And they called it the Dad's Chapel Tour. Oh, not another one.
Instead of all the church historic sites, you go to all of Dad's chapels. That
Some of my kids are my souvenirs, so I'd have to run them over to the hospital where they were born, and you were, I think, born at this one. Built, other ones. But it was fun going back and seeing some of the work that our hands have done. And,
that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. You're listening to Why I Believe on the Mormon Channel. Our guest today is Steve Heywood, who grew up building chapels, as a matter of fact, and we're talking about some of his life experiences. Incidentally, if you're listening, you should know that you can download this program and other programs, including the Why I Believe program and others on the Mormon Channel, by going to radio.lds.org. Steve, it is great to have you here with us today. As we talk about your life experiences, the question enters my mind, have any of your children followed in your footsteps?
Well, that's a good question. I have wonderful children, yes. And what since I've worked at the hospital, it's not one where I can put them underfoot like my dad did.
Yeah, it's not like
so
the old
it's
days,
been tough. So when they were in high school, they would take the vocation class so that they can gain the construction technique and work with someone who could teach them the right principles and skills of construction. What we did do, though, is Carol's family is from Grouse Creek, Utah, and great-grandpa Paskett had a little farm. He was a cowboy out there, and a little right in the heart of Grouse Creek there, two lots away from the co-op. And there came a time where there was some damage inside of the old farmhouse, and so we took it upon ourselves, and we only go 2 or 3 times a year. But since the kids were little, we look forward those 2 times a year. I mean, they were tiny, and we would knock out walls and here and there and remodel that old farmhouse, and it has been just a hoot and a lot of funny memories and experiences working side by side. So that's about where we've done it. I was looking at a few of our family movies when we first moved to West Bountiful. There was a water table problem, and they're all having fun, believe it or not. But we dug a trench and put in a peripheral drain around the yard, and it was something to behold. I mean, they all, even the twin girls, had the wheelbarrow and was pushing the gravel, so to put around this peripheral drain, and even my littlest, who is only just over a year or 2, he just barely could talk, and you could see him so cute he could run from Teresa, can I help you? And she says, go ask Dad. or go ask another brother or sister, can I help you? Can I help you? Until finally he was just, no one will let me help.
He wanted to contribute.
He wanted
so
to
bad.
contribute. It was the cutest little video, but no, we worked together, and I think they learned. They're very creative children, and
Yeah.
and they're very hard workers. Yeah.
How does it feel looking back when you start a project like that, and you're starting from dirt basically,
Yes.
and you build a building upon that, and then you go back years later? Talk about the feeling of accomplishment that you have when you accomplish a goal like that.
Yeah, there again, it's something that we were able to create from, a paper design from a wonderful architect that had the inspiration to put it on. But when you go through, exactly right. It's something that you see homes come and go, that they might be torn down or whatever, but a church is built upon, like I say, in the phases. And it not only do you see that wonderful, beautiful building, but you try to look up a few people, that
you worked with.
Yeah, I shouldn't name a bunch of names because there's so many that you get close to and love. But along with the buildings that are so, there to stay. I think I even mentioned that one of the things as a kid that I was supervising was they actually called it earthquake proofing. You have rebar going, both directions in these masonry walls. Those are built to stay.
Yeah.
And the church that's why they build the buildings in the high quality and standard that they do. And Dad always taught me and taught us and to respect. Don't do any shortcuts. This is the Lord's house.
As you have learned construction, and I'm sure you've learned a lot of principles through that that you can apply in your life. One of those, as a supervisor or manager of other people, you are not just building things, but you are solving a lot of problems, I'm assuming. President Uchtdorf also said this in the same conference address that we mentioned earlier. When our wagon gets stuck in the mud, God is much more likely to assist the man who gets out to push than the man who merely raises his voice in prayer, no matter how eloquent the oration. President Thomas S. Monson put it this way: it is not enough to want to make the effort and to say we'll make the effort. It's in the doing, not just the thinking, that we accomplish our goals. You, I'm sure, have encountered a lot of different situations where you've got to overcome a situation or a problem. Share with us what you learned in construction about turning to the Lord for help with your problems.
Yeah. Let me tell you a little about the Hawaiian temple and the nature. Being on an island, there's the surf on Halila'a. That's a good name for you to try to practice. Halila'a is the main road that goes up to the temple, and the temple is about a mile back. The surf will come up, and you don't realize this. It'll dissipate down the wall, and the moisture will just go down and on the wall. And in 1963, there was an addition. And let me tell you about that Hawaiian temple. When it was first built in the early 1900s, I could take my transit and I could set any horizontal level on that building, and it wouldn't be off 1/8 of an inch. I'm not kidding. They were skilled craftsmen in the old days. Now, not that the 1963 group weren't skilled. Something went amiss a little bit, and that front addition is in 3 inches and 20 feet off skew to the original temple. And I don't want to put them down, but there was a problem there. And so we had to change right angles and the 3, 4, 5 systems that my dad taught me, the Pythagorean theories. And we had to chase those to one room. So all the problems, all these needed to be solved in one room of the temple. Oh. Isn't that interesting? And so I chased them that way. That's what I did. I picked an ordinance room that's just to the east of the main chapel. And I chased them all there, knowing, one day I'll get back to those dimensions and fix them in there. And so everything squared out as we built. But when we first started to tap that wall, now going back to the water and the surf that comes up against the temple wall, my brother Bob had already removed the roof, and we were supposed to leave that particular wall. When the Hiram, which is a chisel that you put on the end of a backhoe, touched that wall for about the third thump, big, you've seen that equipment just thump.
Yeah.
That about 60 feet of that wall, the whole wall fell over. And it's interesting how I would say that was inspiration, because what had happened with the salt coming into that water, it went and settled in the cracks of that the foundation wall and ate the steel, and it was like 2 pencil leads on every single rod that came through that. And so with the engineers rallying how to solve that problem became the solution came to the engineers, and I think even Bob, my brother, helped in saying, hey, that steel cannot be at the bottom of the keyway. We've got to bring it up. So they had to even redesign the steel that usually goes to the exterior portion of the concrete wall and place it on the interior. So that moisture would never get back to the steel. And well, look what we learned, when the wall fell over and the Lord says, hey, you got to fix this, those type of things. And then there again with engineers and like I say, and I wrote it in my introduction, that my brothers are the best of the best. They're the smartest guys in the whole world. And so they figured and solved this out with the engineers. But
Isn't it true that sometimes our greatest lessons come from our biggest challenges? The things that we learn?
Yeah.
You're listening to Why I Believe on the Mormon Channel. Today our guest is Steve Heywood, who has been in building construction for all of his life, learned at the foot of his father. And incidentally, if you'd like to listen to this show at your convenience, you can download it at radio.lds.org. Steve, again, it's great to have you here with us. You traveled a lot with your family, California, Arizona, back east, and you were young. Was this difficult for you as a teenager to move to all those different places, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, it was a little difficult when younger. It was really hard when we first started out, and then on the building mission, and then when I became a teenager, those early years when I turned 13 and 14, and we moved to Mesa, Arizona. It was lonely on the very first time, but my friends were sitting at the Maricopa State Center site. Oh my gosh, it made it so much easier to move around because I didn't lose friends. I actually had friends there. And from that point on, it became a little easier. And then after that, we went to Modesto, California, and finished our mission there. And I was now in high school, and that was harder to move around. Dad now finished the mission. We went back to Salt Lake. He was there for a year trying to work construction, and then built Moscow, Idaho, a chapel there, and in Tucson by himself without the family. And it was very difficult for him being away from family. Now coming back to me as a teenager, I'm in high school, and so Dad didn't want the family to be left behind, so our next assignment was Gurnee, Illinois, Chain Lakes Chapel, and in Chicago. And so we went there, worked the summer, and then started school in Waukegan Township High School. Again, as long as I was with family, I think it was I would follow my dad anywhere. When we first got to Waukegan or Gurnee, there was no place to live, and a wonderful family that lived in Winthrop Harbor, up near Wisconsin. He let us stay in his basement for a while. We stayed even in a strip mall for a little bit, and we just couldn't find a place to stay. And I says to Dad, wouldn't it be adventurous if we just got us a tent and put it on the job site? It didn't matter. I didn't need a place to stay. I didn't need a place to live, and we finally found a duplex to live in. But there was no fear following my dad and going even after the building mission and going and starting again the big adventure and back east in Chicago and then many more chapels.
How did your family draw together as you went out on these excursions together and left friends behind?
I think it'd be easier today because you got email and all this, but I did have friends. I went to South High School, and just wonderful, wonderful people in the Forestdale ward there. It was family again. I knew that I could write letters to my friends back home, but when you're working double shifts, in Gurney, Dad wanted me to learn other phases of the business, and so I was with Klaus Kreuch from Germany, a wonderful electrician, hard-headedest guy I ever met, but he was just wonderful. He'd always do his math in German and try to confuse me, but in Chicago, in Gurney, Illinois, I kept busy during the day working with Klaus, and at nighttime, I worked with the members. And again, it was so fun that older men would allow a young boy like me to be their supervisor in grouting block walls or tacking up gussets on trusses or whatever. Dad had put me right in charge.
Yeah.
It was
wonderful. It sounds like you kept really busy also. It kept you out of trouble.
Yeah. Sure. Oh, yeah, exactly. 16-hour days, they'd do that. But I never, it never wore me out. It was always so fun, to do. One of the brothers, he's Dr. Stoker, he was a dentist. I had some teeth problems before I left, and Dad couldn't afford the bill, and so he negotiated. Being a dental surgeon, he worked for the Navy. He was in the Navy. Brother Stoker, he says, "Why don't we work a deal? I don't want to get my hands dirty. Why don't you sign in for me, and then I will do your dental work?" and I thought that was great. And so the first time,
negotiating.
That's negotiating. So I just loved signing in for Brother Stoker, and I didn't like the dental chair. It was a root canal and all that, but it was just really neat that Dad was able to negotiate something where, of course, we weren't rich, and so it was fun to again, Dad and his negotiating. It was kind of neat to see him do that for me.
Nothing like working and putting in sweat equity for a root canal.
Exactly, but I loved it. Yeah, and being a teenager, it was an adventure. And I'd love to meet people by then.
How would you say that helped you, Steve? The lessons that you learned from moving about and from working with people who you've never met before, has that helped you in any other ways in your life?
Yeah. Moving about, if things weren't going well, sometimes you could think, well, I'm only going to be here for 3 more months, and so I'm out of here. Life is wonderful, and you can... there's more friendships to make at that next place we're there. And my brother, Bob, again, I refer back to him because I was his assistant more than any of the other brothers, but we may never pass this way again. And so he always taught us to enjoy the places and learn the history and go to Jamestown and go to different places that, can you believe that we work for somebody that would actually pay us, to see the United States and have the fun we have building these chapels? Yeah, they paid us for this. Back
what
in
a
the
great
day.
Adventure!
Yeah, what a great adventure! And I didn't even, in the building mission, the payment was blessings, I guess.
Yeah,
but I just enjoyed working. Yeah.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Hawaii.
Okay.
You are the ripe old age of 25 when you assisted your brother in remodeling the Laie Hawaii Temple.
Yes.
How many years did that take?
It took 2 years. Yeah.
So 2 years of your life you were spent there, and I think they even asked you to stay on a little longer to make sure the open house went well. Isn't that correct?
Yeah. It was interesting. They kind of waited till the last minute. Our car was shipped. We had finished our rental. We actually had a kid the flight tickets ready to go. And Wally McPhee, bless his heart, one of the church representatives from Salt Lake, who helped put the tail end to help us to gain occupancy and work through those type of things. Said, "Steve, you're it. We'd love to have you stay." I thought that was the greatest privilege in the whole world. My brother Bob, technically, we had actually finished the temple ahead of schedule, and so he was ready to go home, and he did. And so he left, and so I was left with the final, what they call final occupancy, and then making sure the last details and punch lists were finished and completed. And they asked me also to make sure the transition was smooth from that point and through the open house process. So it was
what a great privilege.
It was so fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know when the dedicatory proceedings happened, all the celebration that was related to that, a bit of a disappointment because you were there and you had been asked to stay on a little longer. But for one reason or another, you didn't get to participate in all of the festivities.
Yeah.
And it would have been great for you to do that. And yet that probably remains a great memory to you, an important time in your life. Even though you may have had some disappointment because you didn't get to participate.
No.
Talk a little bit about that and how you've,
Okay.
I'm specifically interested in how you donate your time and make that for the Lord, relating to that experience. What happened?
Okay, what happened, I was so looking forward to that day. The computer went down 3 days before dedication. Not many know that, and that's the computer that runs everything. It fills the font. It tells the temperature of the water in the font. It's the security system. And if there's a bearing goes out in some of the mechanical, it'll bark like a dog and you say, what's wrong? And it'll tell you, sort of, it's that kind of a thing. It's something new. That was in the 70s. That was before, matter of fact, the one installing that computer says, oh my, this is bigger than the Iolani Palace in Honolulu. It's quite a big computer. Well, there wasn't enough heat or air conditioning, too much heat, and that went down. So that was kind of in 3 days prior to dedication. So things didn't run smooth. I had to get the person on still vacation. San Francisco would come back. And so you're working almost night and day for that dedication. And then sure enough, the prophet will show up, and he's there, and he's going to do his walkthrough, his inspection of the temple. And I was looking so forward to doing that walkthrough with President Kimball. The newly hired church engineer, building engineer, came to me and says, Steve, President Kimball is about to make his visit through the temple, his tour through the temple. He's asked all the workers to go to the basement. Excuse me, what? No, I've been waiting all this, I've worked 2 years. No, that's the instructions. Well, maybe go ask. No, I don't think so. He wants you. No, they. I don't think President Kimball even knew. He sent the superintendent to the basement. But I went to the basement, and it kind of broke my heart. It was a hard thing to get over, and you don't want it be the pint of cream that makes me want to leave the church type of thing. But
certainly you had some expectation and some hope that you would be able to meet.
It broke my heart. So the question asked, what do I do? So because I experienced something that you were looking so forward to. Whenever I'm in a church calling, or even if I'm not, I try to be aware. Say, for instance, you're doing baptisms with the youth, and a father might be there, and it might be the first time. You're experienced in that, so you look at the young man and you look at the father, and you make sure that that's an experience they can share, that they don't get split up in the temple or that kind of thing, that they can have either a confirmation or a baptism or something that they can have as a strength or a memory that they can look back to, that they won't look back or a father's going, gosh, I went there and I didn't have the courage to say that this is my first time. You start to be aware of others around you, and if there's new people and you're having a ward activity, make sure that you're not just involved in the people and visiting, but be aware of people coming and going.
That you include others.
They include others, welcoming them, and not left out. That they don't have an experience that hopefully they look back on, and it might be that little pint of cream that they might not get over it like I did.
When you go back to that temple in Hawaii, do you experience those feelings of, I worked on this temple and I put a lot of time into it and I love this temple kind of thing?
From the time I step on the grounds, I can't stop crying. Last time we were there, "What's wrong, Brother Heywood?" And I told him who I was. And what was neat is his answer. His answer was, "Heywood, that's a very special name to this temple. I'm not the only one. See, Bob and Lamar, my brother, lived in Hawaii for 17 years, and it was nice to know that the name Heywood meant something to that particular temple worker. And I get really, really emotional. One of the things that I think about when I go back and even though, deeply I was hurt, is the fact that I know that temple was accepted by the Lord. And I had an experience in that sweet room that I had to chase all those dimensions back to that ordinance room. The night I had to give the keys back, that was my temple. I didn't want to give those keys up. I made sure that it was beautiful and clean. I carried a vacuum with me from door to door to door to door. And I knew that the lights, again with that wonderful computer that runs the thing, would shut the lights off at 11 o'clock at night. And so I left the vacuum at the front door and walked out to the front. There's a beautiful concrete bench that's back right there in the front arch of the temple, or front of grass of the temple. But I thought that would be a good spot to watch the lights finally go out for the last time that the temple was mine. And so I did. And the lights went down. I walked in and grabbed the vacuum and pulled that vacuum behind me so that beautiful plush carpet wouldn't have my footprints in it. And I headed for my little ordinance room. And by the way, the colors ended up being my favorite color. And I go in there, and I thought, this is my last time. So I thought I would kneel down and thank the Lord for the opportunity and, privilege of working on his house. Kind of explained to him that there was a couple of things that went wrong and that if he would still accept it. And I had this wonderful feeling that the Lord had accepted our work. And I finished, and it was the most wonderful experience in the whole world to be able to when I go back, and even now, I almost have that same feeling as I step on the grounds of the temple each time I go.
Steve, thanks for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm interested to hear, Steve, you had an experience during your travels with your father and your family where you had the opportunity to bear your testimony for the first time.
Oh, yes.
And then you had an opportunity to bear your testimony for the second time. And I think it would be nice for our listeners to hear that story.
Okay, wonderful. After Chicago, I came back to South High School and then went to, for the summers now, it worked better with my dad knowing that I needed to be in school. And so we were in Griffith, Indiana. There was a wonderful Sunday school teacher. His name was Brother Onias. And when he would teach his Sunday school lessons, we were teenagers, and I've seen it. I had the deer in the headlight look, and he was teaching the atonement, and I wasn't catching it, but he would not embarrass me, but make sure that every concept, every piece, every principle of that atonement, he wouldn't go on until I knew it. And so, for one, he was a great teacher. Another, he had parties at his house, and another thing he did, he took us all to Nauvoo on a field trip. So we went to the park that night, and we had a campfire. And usually at youth campfires, you tell ghost stories. But then it ended up in a testimony meeting. I had, for the first time, I'm so sorry, I'm so emotional here. But for the first time in my life, I had that deep, burning feeling that I knew Joseph Smith was a prophet. I knew what cause he was martyred for. I knew the church was true, and so I bore my testimony for the first time. And then after that trip, I get back to Griffith, Indiana. We lived in Gary in a little Quonset hut, and my mom was waiting, and she says, "Steve, we've got we've got to hurry. Dad wants to get on the road. We're going to go to Palmyra and see the pageant. And Dad usually is a workaholic sort. What? He's playing? So I knew my big brother Bob had probably something to do with this, to enjoy this area and go up to New York and see the pageant. When we were there, we were in awe of the crowds that come. And it was in early 60s, see, or late 60s. And and the pageant was fairly new. And the cast, we got there early enough to have sacrament meeting in the Sacred Grove. My testimony was getting stronger and stronger. And then when the pageant started, the missionaries came up and found out that we were members and said, oh, they're overwhelmed with all the non-members that this draws. Could I please be one of those that could split with them and bear my testimony? You know, before that Nauvoo experience with that wonderful Sunday school teacher, I probably would have said no. I just felt it a privilege and an opportunity to just share what now was burning within me. I knew not only that Joseph Smith gave his life for the restoration, but I knew what had happened in the Grove of Trees. And they specifically said, could you please bear your testimony about the first vision? And I did. Oh, my goodness. I was on my way. You know, there's no doubt that the church had been restored. And the Father and the Son did appear to that young man in that grove that day. But that's from a wonderful Sunday school teacher that really knew his job.
Yeah. Well, Steve, we're coming to the end of our program today, and it has been great to talk to you about all of your experiences. You have spent a lot of time around the buildings of the church. And in your life, as you've done that, you've learned a lot of lessons, not only about building, but you've strengthened your testimony along the way and learned so many life lessons, it seems like. Just a really neat experience. The name of our program is Why I Believe. Can we conclude today with you sharing why you believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ?
Why I believe that this is the true Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is there again, as I have mentioned earlier, I've had these wonderful experiences where, you know, when you're a youth, I thought I was like any other normal kid, and I would share my life with all these other normal kids in all these different schools, and I didn't think it was so much different. And the point being is these experiences came line upon line and precept on precept. You don't really sometimes even know when you're with a father like I have, or brothers like I've got, and mother and sisters like I have, and family like I have, that's a day-to-day thing that sometimes the still small voice whispers to you, and you're having these experiences. They are things that are building your testimony day after day after day after day. And I guess you can lose your testimony too if you draw away from family in these situations and don't go to church and all these things. You don't realize how subtly that testimony will dwindle. But traveling around, as long as I stayed with my father and stayed close to my mother and my sisters and siblings and do the things that my father has taught me, it's not like I did have a Joseph Smith experience, but it's just a day by day by day thing that teaches me, and as I read the scriptures and as I like you're saying, worked on these wonderful buildings that like I say, I thought I was like everyone else, but I guess I'm not. I was able to work on so many wonderful buildings that day after day experiences would strengthen that testimony that I have. You know, so I do. That's why I believe.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you so much.
This is Why I Believe on the Mormon Channel. For more information on this program and other programs on the Mormon Channel, please visit us at radio.lds.org.